Revelation, the story older than time. What if the fairy tale you thought you knew was never meant for children at all? Most people remember Rumpelstiltskin from a storybook, a strange little man who could spin straw into gold for a price. But here's what they don't tell you. This tale, buried in bedtime lullabies, is more than 4,000 years old. It predates the Grimm brothers, Christianity, and even written language. And its meaning? It has nothing to do with nursery rhymes. This was a survival manual, a warning, a coded history of power, betrayal, and forgotten gods. Let's go back, far beyond the medieval castles and spinning wheels, to the oldest version of this tale, to the shadowed crossroads where history and myth collide. Rumpelstiltskin, not a name, but a puzzle. Let's start with the name. Rumpelstiltskin sounds like nonsense, like a goblin invented for children. But the truth is darker. In Old High German, Rumpelstilts means something more like noisy, mischievous poltergeist, a house spirit, a trickster, a boundary crosser. The suffix chen is a diminutive, like saying little or dear. So, the name Rumpelstiltskin isn't just a name. It's a title, a mask, a whisper of something ancient, something that was never meant to be named. And in nearly every culture on Earth, there's a shared belief. To name something is to control it. But to name the wrong thing is to set it loose. This tale isn't about a silly goblin. It's about the price of powerful knowledge, and what happens when you try to cheat a deal with the unknown. The tale before the tale. Ancient echoes. Versions of the Rumpelstiltskin story, or tales with the same exact structure, appear all across ancient cultures. In the Middle East, a myth tells of a desert spirit who grants impossible favors in exchange for a soul, unless his name is spoken under moonlight. In India, the Vedic legend of Koka and Vikoka involves demonic twins who could only be defeated by discovering their secret names. In Norse sagas, there's a dwarf who spins silver from spider silk and demands the firstborn of a desperate queen. In Egypt, Thoth warns that to write a name without permission is to curse the soul of the named. The stories all share a woman in a desperate trap, a mysterious being who offers a way out, a deal made under pressure, and a final moment of revelation where naming becomes power. But in many of these older versions, the outcome is far from happy. The child is often lost, the woman punished. The being, whatever it is, isn't defeated by a name, it's summoned by it. This isn't fantasy. It's folkloric memory. Stories passed down not just to entertain, but to warn. Spinning straw into gold, the alchemy of desperation. Now let's talk about the most magical part of the story. Spinning straw into gold. Sounds whimsical, right? But if you lived in pre-modern Europe, straw was poverty. It was bedding, kindling, and livestock fodder. Gold, on the other hand, was life, power, nobility, salvation. So when a miller lies and says, "My daughter can spin straw into gold," it's not a boast. It's a desperate grab for status, a bribe to buy safety from a tyrant king. And the king, he doesn't question it. He throws the girl into a locked room. No food, no help, just a spinning wheel and a death sentence. Produce the gold, or die. That's when he arrives. The stranger in the shadows. He's never invited. He just appears. No backstory. No reason to help. No price, at first. He asks for simple things. A necklace. A ring. A promise. Give me what you don't yet know you need. That's the language of tricksters. Of old gods. This figure, whatever we call him, does something almost unthinkable. He rescues her. Not once, but 3 times. And in return, she offers something she doesn't yet understand. My firstborn child. Not realizing that, in every ancient tradition, the child is the most powerful currency of all. The hidden purpose of the story. What is this tale really telling us? It's not just about greed, or lying, or names. It's about the cost of survival. The girl is a pawn in a game of kings and monsters. She's trapped by her father's ambition, a ruler's cruelty, and the only salvation comes from something outside the known world. That salvation comes at a cost. But here's the question we're never taught to ask. Why does Rumpelstiltskin help her at all? Why does he spin the gold? Why does he make her a queen? Why does he give her 3 chances to undo the deal? Because in the oldest versions of the story, he isn't a villain. He's a test. Deal with the devil, or deal with the divine. Across ancient myth, many figures take the form of tempters or tricksters. Loki in Norse tales, Thoth in Egypt, Hermes in Greek mythology, Ravana in Hindu lore. These aren't just mischief makers. They're threshold guardians. They stand at the edge of life and death, power and ruin, asking, "How badly do you want what you asked for? And what are you willing to give up to keep it?" In this story, Rumpelstiltskin doesn't break in. He doesn't threaten. He saves and waits. He represents a cosmic law. Everything has a price. Not because he's cruel. Because he's honest. More honest than the king. More honest than the miller. Even more honest than the girl who agrees to the deal and then forgets it. Until he returns. Coming next. Part 2. The bargain that changed her fate. What really happened after the baby was born, and why the Grimms changed the ending to hide the truth. The bargain that changed her fate. She thought the nightmare was over. She was wrong. The deal wasn't broken, it was just beginning. The gold had been spun. The king was satisfied. The girl had survived and become queen. That's where most fairy tales end. Happily ever after, right? But not this one. Because when the child was born, the one she promised away, he came back. He always does. The queen who made a deal with shadows. Now she's no longer a helpless girl in a locked room. She's the queen. She wears a crown. Commands servants. Sleeps in silk. But none of that protects her from the deal she made in secret. Because when the child is born, the symbol of legacy, power, and everything she's gained, the old figure returns. This time, the bargain is clear. Give me the child. And just like that, the palace is not a sanctuary. It's a cage. Because how do you explain this deal to anyone? How do you tell the king you traded your baby to a creature who spins gold? You can't. You're alone again. The most chilling part of the tale. In the Grimm version, this is the moment the story becomes a riddle. Rumpelstiltskin, perhaps pitying her, perhaps testing her again, offers a chance. Guess my name in 3 days, and you may keep the child. But why? Why offer mercy? Why give her an out? Because this is not about punishment. This is a lesson. In ancient traditions, especially oral storytelling cultures, knowing a being's true name was the most sacred knowledge of all. It was believed that if you could name a spirit, a god, or a demon, you could control it. That's what this final test is about. Not wordplay. Not trickery. Identity. Who are you, really? And who am I, beneath the story they told you? A deal with the devil, or a challenge from a forgotten god? We tend to frame Rumpelstiltskin as a devil, a villain. But think again. Devils don't offer second chances. They don't let you win. They don't play by rules. This figure, strange, mysterious, powerful, not only gives her multiple chances, he binds himself to a verbal agreement. That's not a monster. That's an old god. Or at least a being bound by sacred law, the kind you find in Norse myth, Mesopotamian epics, or Vedic cosmology, where deals are cosmic events, and breaking them has eternal consequences. In this sense, Rumpelstiltskin is like the Fates or Anubis or Loki. He doesn't punish for fun. He appears only when something vital is at stake. The ritual of naming. Let's look at how the queen discovers his name. She sends out messengers. All fail. She tries guessing common names. All wrong. But then, a twist. A lone messenger, wandering through a dark forest, stumbles upon a hidden clearing. And there, under the moonlight, a figure dances around a fire and chants. Tonight, tonight, my plans I make. Tomorrow, tomorrow, the baby I take. The queen will never win this game. For Rumpelstiltskin is my name. Let's pause. Why would a being that wants to stay hidden dance around a fire and say their name out loud? Because in ancient cultures, rituals were performative. You didn't just do magic. You declared it. You sang it, chanted it, named it aloud, to invoke the power behind it. So Rumpelstiltskin's chant isn't a mistake. It's a declaration. A challenge. A test. One last chance for the queen to prove she's learned the rules of power. A name spoken, a power broken. When the queen utters his name, something changes. Rumpelstiltskin doesn't just vanish. He explodes with rage. In some versions, he screams. In others, he splits in two. In the earliest tales, he laughs and disappears in a flash of light. Why such a violent ending? Because being named is not just a loss. It's a revelation. And in the world of myth, when a being's true name is spoken, it is called into form. No more hiding. No more tricks. He becomes real, and in that moment, defeated. But even that feels incomplete. Because in the oldest stories, Rumpelstiltskin doesn't die. He returns. Again and again. To different women. Different kings. Different bargains. Because this story isn't about one person. It's about a cycle. A lesson each generation has to learn for themselves. The versions they tried to erase. Before the Brothers Grimm cleaned it up, the Rumpelstiltskin story was raw. Violent. Sexual. Chaotic. In one version, the queen never guesses the name. The child is taken. Years later, the grown-up prince seeks the truth and uncovers the bargain his mother made. In another, Rumpelstiltskin raises the child. The baby becomes a powerful sorcerer. The kingdom falls to war, and only the cursed son can restore peace. In a lost Russian variant, the being is female. She is a midwife spirit who demands the child to protect it from a coming plague. What's clear is this. The sanitized version, the one we all know, is not the original. It's a domesticated myth. Trimmed. Flattened. Stripped of its teeth. Because the original? That was too dangerous. What was the real message? Why has this story survived for 4,000 years? Because it's not just about magic. It's about power and its price. Women navigating systems stacked against them. The deals we make to survive, and the names we must learn to reclaim ourselves. Rumpelstiltskin isn't evil. He's the shadow that watches when you're at your most desperate. He doesn't come for the rich or the powerful. He comes for the trapped, and offers one chance, one bargain, to change everything. But only if you're willing to name what you fear the most. Coming next. Part 3. The Goddess, the Child, and the Final Twist. What if Rumpelstiltskin was never a man, but a goddess erased by time? The Goddess, the Child, and the Final Twist. The deeper we go into this story, the clearer it becomes. Rumpelstiltskin was never meant to be just a man, or even a monster. He was once something far more sacred, and far more feared. We've talked about deals, desperation, and hidden names. But there's one secret that changes everything. Rumpelstiltskin might not have been male at all. In some of the oldest Proto-Indo-European oral traditions, preserved only in fragments and whispers, the being in this story was not a goblin, but a goddess. A wild, protective spirit. A patron of childbirth, fate, and female survival. A figure lost in the fires of time, and rewritten as a villain. Let's unearth her story. Rumpelstiltskin was once a woman? The earliest folk motifs tied to the Rumpelstiltskin archetype come from pre-Vedic Indian traditions, Hittite Anatolian myths, early Slavic and Baltic matriarchal tales. In these versions, the mysterious being is often a woman, or an entity of ambiguous gender, referred to as the Thread Mother, she who spins fate, the crone of the wheel. Her role, to appear when birth, death, or legacy hangs in the balance. To offer a deal, a way out, at a steep but fair price. She didn't steal children. She rescued them. From fathers who abandoned them. From kings who would use them as pawns. From a world where motherhood could mean death. Over time, her legend was reshaped, first by patriarchal mythmakers, then by medieval scribes. She went from goddess to witch, from wise woman to monster. But the structure of the tale never changed. because the truth still pulsed beneath the revisions. There is a power that lives outside the palace, outside the law, outside the rules of men, and it waits, in the forest, in the shadows, in the firelight, to be remembered. The spinning wheel and the circle of fate. Let's talk about that wheel. Why is spinning so central to this story? Because in almost every ancient myth system, spinning was a metaphor for fate. The Greek moirai spun, measured, and cut the thread of life. The Norse Norns sat beneath Yggdrasil spinning destiny for gods and men. In Hindu cosmology, Kala, the personification of time, turns the great wheel of samsara. So when Rumpelstiltskin spins straw into gold, it's not just magic. It's a ritual act. He's not just making wealth, he's changing the girl's fate. But that power comes with a price. Because in every myth, changing fate requires sacrifice. The child as currency. Why a child? Why is that always the final price? Because across the ancient world, children were heirs, symbols of future power, offerings, tokens given to gods or forces in return for protection, bargaining chips, the one thing people would never give up, unless they were desperate. In Sumerian myth, kings offered their sons to Inanna. In Celtic lore, the goddess Brigid demanded firstborns to sanctify a land. Even in the Bible, the story of Abraham and Isaac echoes this theme. Will you give up your child, your legacy, your hope, if the divine demands it? So in the Rumpelstiltskin story, the child isn't a random prize. It's the ultimate measure of the queen's transformation. Did she learn? Does she understand the cost of what she was given? Can she name the force she invoked and reclaim her future? That's the test. A story rewritten by empire. As Christianity spread through Europe, goddess worship and old matriarchal traditions were systematically erased. Sacred feminine figures became witches, demons, goblins, evil stepmothers, and protective spirits, like the one at the center of this tale, were turned into monsters. That's how Rumpelstiltskin the goddess became Rumpelstiltskin the trickster man. Coming next, Part 4, The Legacy We Forgot, and Why This Tale Still Matters. In a world of modern myths, this ancient story may hold the key to understanding power, agency, and the secret names we still hide from ourselves. The legacy we forgot, and why this tale still matters. What if the story of Rumpelstiltskin isn't just a fairy tale, but a survival guide, a warning, or a map for reclaiming something we've lost? The spinning wheel has stopped. The child has been saved. The queen has spoken the name. But as we close the book, something lingers. A feeling. A question. Why does this strange little tale still haunt us? 4,000 years later. Because it's not over. Not really. And deep down we know that. From Sumer to Silicon Valley. This is where things get strange. Fragments of the Rumpelstiltskin story, or stories like it, have been found in ancient Mesopotamian clay tablets, Proto-Hittite funerary chants, African griot oral histories, Slavic lullabies, Inuit trickster tales, medieval Spanish shadow plays, and even modern urban legends on Reddit. It's a cross-cultural archetype, a myth that refuses to die. Because in every generation, people feel trapped by systems of power, whether that's kings, companies, religions, or reputations. And every time, there's a moment of desperate choice. What would you trade to survive? What part of yourself are you willing to bargain away? That's not fantasy. That's life. Rumpelstiltskin in the modern mind. Psychologists have a name for this kind of tale. Initiation myth. A story meant to represent a shift. From ignorance to knowledge. From victimhood to power. From helplessness to self-definition. In Jungian theory, Rumpelstiltskin represents the shadow, the part of the psyche we fear, reject, or refuse to name. But here's the twist. The shadow isn't trying to destroy you. It wants to be acknowledged, named, integrated. And that's exactly what happens at the climax of the story. When the queen names Rumpelstiltskin, she is not just defeating a monster. She's reclaiming the part of herself she gave away, the desperation, the guilt, the hidden strength. This is the real gold in the story. Not the kind that glitters, but the kind that transforms. the tale as a mirror for women's power. Let's not forget, the protagonist is a woman, and her journey, from powerless girl to reigning queen, maps almost exactly to the real historical shift of female power in society. In early versions of the story, the heroine is unnamed. Her value is defined entirely by what she can produce: gold, a child, a legacy. Her deal is made in secret, with no voice or vote. But by the end, she has a name. She speaks it boldly, and she defeats a being older and more powerful than her, not with force, but with understanding. This is not a damsel in distress story. It's a story of initiation, a myth that reflects the inner awakening of someone learning. No one is coming to save me. I must learn the names of my fears, and say them out loud. In that way, the story is more relevant today than ever. The hidden meaning of the name. Let's talk one last time about that name, Rumpelstiltskin. It sounds silly. It's been laughed at for centuries. But names in old stories always meant something. The German name breaks down to Rumpel, to make disorder, confusion, or twist. Stilt, a crutch or support. Skin, self, or covering. Put together, it might translate as the twisted support of identity. Or more metaphorically, the hidden force that supports your world, but demands a price. Suddenly, it's not so funny. It's haunting. Because that's what this being is. He holds you up when no one else will. He gives you what you need when the world leaves you for dead. But he won't let you forget what it cost. Not until you name it. The cycles we repeat. You may have never spun straw into gold. You may have never promised a child to a stranger. But we all make trades. We give our time for money, our privacy for convenience, our dreams for security. And often, we don't realize the price until it's too late. That's why this story endures. Because it's not about fantasy. It's about recognition. Seeing ourselves, not in the queen, or the king, or the baby, but in the moment between the bargain and the name. The space where we ask, what have I promised? What did I lose? And can I still take it back? Legacy. The story we never stopped telling. So here we are, 4,000 years later. We tell the story again, to children. We clean it up, make it safer. But some part of us remembers the truth. The deal. The fear. The whispered name in the dark. Because Rumpelstiltskin was never really about him. It was about you. About what you'll do when no one is watching. What bargains you'll make. And whether you'll have the strength to say, I know your name. I'm not afraid anymore. A legacy reborn. He was erased from history, recast as a monster. But now, 4,000 years later, the world finally knows who he really was, and why his name still echoes in our stories. If this made you see fairy tales differently, this is where they come alive. Subscribe for more hidden truths and mythic revelations. Comment, what fairy tale do you think is hiding a lost history? Share this if you think more people should know the real story behind Rumpelstiltskin.